wanted to do was a couple housekeeping things. So as you will see, when you enter the conference, you'll be muted. This is a presentation format, so the camera and the microphone will be with Bill. However, there will be a chance to ask questions and to dialogue with Bill and to raise issues and have a bit more interaction. So if you would like to say something, then press the exclamation mark that's under the list of names or that's under the picture, and at an appropriate time I'll unmute you and give you a chance to say something. So if you press that button, don't worry, if this works properly, which it has been so far, I'll see that you essentially have your hand up, and I will come to you when it's time for questions. So now I'm just gonna check, see if Don had anything he wanted to add. Don, you're unmuted if you wanted to add anything. No?
Oh, I'm muted. Oh, I just want to welcome everybody and echo what you just said. We really appreciate all of the great work that the different principle-based practitioners are doing for us, and we're getting new material all the time, and we're grateful that we've been able to post new podcasts and blog posts and things every week since we launched the site. And last month we were happy to have Judy Sedgman kick off our webinar series, and we're honored to have Bill Pettit talk today, and we're very grateful that he's taken the time out to spend a little time with us. I know we've got a lot of people on the line, so I would just introduce the great Bill Pettit and turn it over to him. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, yes. Thank you both for the very kind introduction. It's my understanding, I'm Bill Pettit, and I am a psychiatrist and have been one for many years, and was introduced to the three principles over 30 years ago now, in January of 1983. I'm understanding that there's a fair number of new people, and so for those of you that have known me through the 30 years, a lot of this will probably seem like an old story. But I was told in preparing for this that it was best to kind of give a sense of my own journey in understanding the principles and being exposed to them, and then my own journey in sharing those principles as a psychiatrist. I will tell you ahead of time that being exposed to these three principles and meeting Mr. Banks and having him as a teacher for 26 years, there's no pot of gold or no lottery win that or anything that I would trade that for. It's meant a quality of life for myself, both personally and professionally, that I had never dreamt would be possible for me. So I finished medical school back in 1969 and did a couple of years of surgery training, and because I like results, and there's still a part of me that has a surgeon's mind, I think. And after 2 years of 36 on and 12 off, I resigned myself that I wasn't able to do that in the state of mind I was in, and exhausted, I stopped my residency in surgery and was immediately drafted during the Vietnam War, and spent then 3 years, 6 months in training and 2.5 more as a family doctor for a squadron of Navy pilots, referred to as a flight surgeon. It was during that time, from 71 to 74, that I started to realize that people's state of mind has tremendous effect not only on their mental well-being, but on their physical well-being. As a physician, I saw the effect that state of mind had, and I was puzzled too by my own state of mind, which seemed to change in ways that I, at the time and the level of understanding I was at, experienced no control over. It was if there were many days that I would love to have me as a friend, and there were other days and moments that I would not even want to have me as a neighbor. and I was curious, obviously, and puzzled and a little bit chagrined by that, as were people around me, you can imagine. And I entered the psychiatry residency in the Navy and completed it in 1977. And after 3 years of practicing psychiatry, I was disillusioned that if all I had was these medications, which at times could take away some of the pain and limit some of the pain, and I was grateful for that, but I didn't find that there was a pill that could give people peace of mind. And I myself had for many years gone in and out of clinical depression through the years. And not that I was hospitalized, but I got to, at times, it was very difficult for me to function. And I had no idea that this had anything to do with the fact that I was spending probably 6 to 9 hours a day in what I'll call using this gift, this divine gift of thought, in a way that was not meant to be used, in worry about the future, in guilt about the past, resentment related to the past, upset about things. I found a way to even ruin the present. We talk about the power of living in the now, but if I'm living, when I was in the now, about 50% of the time I was upset about something that wasn't the way I wanted it to be. Unresolved grief, overanalyzing. I found many ways to innocently use this gift in a way that was hurtful to me, and as a result paid the price, living in a constant state of stress, looking for ways to, after the fact, to lessen the effect of the stress on my life. I finally got into running and would run 40 to 50 miles a week, and that was certainly better than 40 to 50 Manhattan Perfects or 40 to 50 beers a week, I'm sure. But it was still after the fact, and I was still creating all this tension. I was fortunate enough that when I stopped psychiatry, took a break from psychiatry and worked for a company that was based in California, in San Rafael, California, I was fortunate enough during that period in 1983, and I was there from 80 to 83, that I met Dr. George Pransky. And after having a meeting with him for 2 hours early in 1983, I remember thinking, I'm not sure what he's talking about, but I do believe this is going to change my life forever. And then on April 1st in 1983, Dr. Pransky had invited me to listen to a weekend with a man named Sidney Banks, who he had learned from. And I sat that weekend in San Francisco with about 250 other people on April Fool's Day in 1983. And I can tell you who the fool was. Because as I sat there with 26.5 years of schooling, totally stressed out, and listening to a man that I was told had a 9th grade education, but who was sitting in front of 250 people with incredible ease, talking with no prompters, from his heart, for an hour and a half, 2 hours at a time, I saw that he knew something that I didn't know, and I really wanted to have what I saw that he had in his own life. And I started the journey at that time in 1983, and it's been a 30-year journey. And it's been an incremental journey. I think it's important for people to know that in a way there's no it. Seeing the depth and the nature of the 3 principles of mind, thought, and consciousness, as Sid Banks would say, is an infinite journey. There's an infinite number of doors to go through, and one is filled with gratitude for every incremental insight that allows you to see a little clearer. I remember the first 6 months after being exposed to the principles. After about 6 months, I remember the day that I said to myself, boy, now I understand these principles. Only about 6 months later, I had the same experience, to where I said, boy, now I see. Now I understand these principles. that process has continued for now over 30 years, where it would appear, in my experience, that every 6 months or so, I see a little clearer and my life is a little gentler than it was before, despite the fact that, as we all know, life is a contact sport. People die, things happen financially, things happen health-wise, and despite that, there's been a growing sense of internal calm and peace that I live in, that I'm just extremely grateful for each day of my life. As I started to see for myself, the first thing I saw when I saw the principles, or began to get a glimpse of the principles, was that thinking was something that I was doing, and no one had ever informed me of that. And I used to think that things were eating on me. What I came to see clearly was that I used to spend a lot of time chewing on negative things. I'd like to share maybe 3 or 4 of the most prominent things, and maybe talk about the principles here as best as I can for a few minutes. The names mind, thought, and consciousness are words that Mr. Banks used to attempt to point to some spiritual truths. And I would ask those especially new, I would ask anyone, even those that think they know, to try to listen reflectively or softly, if you will, like you listen to music. I think you're much more apt to have those moments of insight, as is true for me also, rather than trying to listen with your analytical mind engaged to where you're checking each thing I say out, whether you agree, disagree, approve, disapprove, implications, applications, etc. You may have those thoughts, but I would encourage you to thank your brain for sharing its comments, and try to stay with me as in a nice a feeling as possible. The principle of mind, and we all speak about this in different ways, and to me speaks to that, as Mr. Banks certainly gives different definitions, not because its definitions change, but there are different ways of seeing the depth of what he's trying to point to. He would say it's the intelligent energy of all things that are either in form or formless. And I remember when I first heard Sid speak, he used to talk about, he used to use 3 words a lot, and they were puzzling to me, but now I at least have a glimpse of what he was talking about. He talked about the great nothingness, and then he talked about the isness, and then he talked about the allness. And as I've come to understand the great nothingness, he was pointing to that formless, intelligent energy that was present prior to the formation of the universe. That there was a formless, intelligent energy that has no beginning, that has no end, that was there prior to the formation of the universe. And he called this the great nothingness, or mind, the intelligent energy of all things, either in form or formless. But then the universe is created, and it has to be created as its source of energy. It has to be created from that formless energy. And so that would say that everything in the universe, including you and I, are made of this energy. Some people would call that divine energy. Physicists would have another name for it, but it would point to the same thing, that everything in the universe is created and has as its source the formless energy that was there before the form was created. And so you have the isness being all the form in the entire universe, even as it expands at an ever rapid pace. And then the allness, very simply, would be the great nothingness, or that formless energy with all the formed energy. And Sid would say that without taking the two together, you're living in a cosmic lie. So that the allness is both the, if you will, the spiritual, the formless, and the physical formed universe, and that they're really the same thing in a different disguise. And as I started to get a glimpse of that and the ramifications of that, and that I was using this power of universal mind to think my own personal thoughts, and that I was given also a free will, that I was given a free will along with this power of thought, a free will that I never knew that I had. It's interesting, I went through 26.5 years of schooling, and prior to meeting Mr. Banks and learning about the principles, or of the principles, I do not remember one lecture on mental health. In 26.5 years of schooling, and with degrees all over my walls that said I was a mental health professional. I wasn't a mental health professional. I was a mental illness professional. I knew a lot about mental illness. I could talk at length about it. I could get very high scores on tests if tested about it. But I did not know anything about mental health. I didn't have it myself. I did have it, as we all do, and you can't lose it, but I was not in touch with it. And I know, having this free will and this gift of thought, the second gift, or the second principle, is the universal thought, or divine thought, the power of thought. The power of thought is formless, just like mind. It's formless. It's universal. And it is from that power that we make the missing link between the formless world and the world of form. Because once you and I use the power of thought to create thoughts, which we're doing all the time, we're thinking beings, they estimate, the estimates are somewhere around 70,000 to 100,000 thoughts a day that we think. As we use that power of thought, we create form. Literally, in our brain is a computer. It's biological. The mind is spiritual and formless. If I had if you will, someone who had freshly died and who they were in front of me, they would have their brain there, but that brain would not be energized. It would not be connected to the energy of life, which I'm calling mind. And so as soon as I start using the gift of thought, I use it by means of this brain, and it takes form. It takes electrical form. You can measure each thought. You can measure the chemicals that are actually created and formed inside our head with different kinds of thinking. And it takes on a physical form and life as we use the gift of thought. So we have mind, and we have the gift of thought, the universal thought, and then there's the gift of consciousness. And consciousness is the gift of awareness that we have, that we are aware of every one of our thoughts as if it were reality. And that's a problem, and can be a problem at times, because everything that we think appears real to us. So consciousness is that special effects area in the brain, it is manifested through the special effects area sometimes, in that we are, well, it is really the gift of awareness that we are aware of whatever our brain creates as our personal reality. What I was kind of jumping ahead on is that some of the people that I deal with will have visual hallucinations, where they will see things outside that appear to be coming from them from the outside. They will hear voices that appear to them to be coming from the outside. It's been a marvelous thing to see many of those people start to grasp the principles and to see even that they're the only thing you and I can experience is thought. That literally from birth to death, we experience life via one thought at a time. And that even hallucinations are just thoughts with special effects. That's all they are. If any of us on this webinar would take hallucinogens and imbibe them, we would, within a certain X period of time, depending on the drug, we would experience hallucinations that would be experienced as if they were coming from the outside. But it's clear that it's not. It would be parts of our brain being stimulated and activated, that special effect system that would create this illusion. So people often ask, how do you know when to trust your thinking? And it's so simple. I think our analytical mind wants to say it can't be that simple, but it is simple. Any thought that taken seriously or given attention leads to a lessening of our peace of mind and gratitude and loving feeling is leading us down a track, down a path towards a lot of negative experiences, negative emotions, anger, jealousy, hatred, fear, lostness, anxiety. And what's been interesting to see in the scientific literature in the years that I was at the West Virginia University with Judith Sedgman, almost 10 years I was there, and during that time was able to have time to do a fair amount of reading and to be up on the literature on stress, etc. And what's been found is that from the mid-'80s in the fMRI exams and SPECT exams, where they can measure indirectly what happens in the brain with a person, a volunteer being hooked up to these instruments, then asked to think or be presented with certain kinds of stimuli. But even if they're asked to personally think upsetting thoughts for as little as 3 minutes, people create a small but very clear biological imbalance, dysregulation in their brain. Now that's quite a thing, that 3 minutes of upsetting thinking can start a biological dysfunction in the brain that would, if continued, will affect neurotransmitters, will affect receptors, will affect, even now there's a whole field that some of you have heard me talk about called epigenetics, where they've found that the 30,000 genes that we have as human beings that control many, many things in our body are under genetic control. That is, that not all of them are on at the same time. So you can have many genes, and they're kind of like the dictionary you have, the words you have in your dictionary. But which ones are used are determined by your state of mind. That people in a chronic state of stress will innocently, please hear that, innocently. Don't hear blame. I did not live in a painful stress state of mind going in and out of depression for 25 years from age 16 to 41 because I liked feeling like crap. It just didn't know any better. So people are innocently doing this, but to the degree that people get stuck in negative thinking, it is not that what is being pointed to now from the research is that somewhere over 30 minutes of being stressed out starts actually turning off healthy protective genes and activating illness genes. To bring this to real life, it's not unusual for me if I see somebody who admits, say they're 45 years old, and they have admit that when I ask them to rate themselves on how much time they spend in using this gift of thought in things like worry, guilt, resentment, upset, overanalysis, unresolved grief, it is not unusual when they tell me 10, 12, 14 hours a day, and they've been doing this for 10 to 15 years, I can almost predict that at least they will have some of the following: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, maybe borderline or type 2 diabetes, that they often will have some headache, either cluster headaches or migraine. They will have some bowel problem, either irritable bowel disease or chronic constipation or chronic diarrhea. And they will have some pain syndrome, either fibromyalgia or some chronic pain syndrome. And it's innocent. We're all human beings. We're trying to find our way home the best that we possibly can. And I think it's so important that we keep compassion both for ourselves and for other people. Because without compassion and the positive feeling, as Mr. Banks has said many times, life becomes very very negative and very lost. And that brings us to the point of how do you trust when your thinking is when you're using the gift of thought in an effective, proper way, and it is by the feeling. I remember Sid used to say, look for a positive feeling. Don't look to try to figure out what I'm saying analytically. So I'm pointing to something. I have to use metaphors. I have to use examples, but please don't look at my finger, he would say. Try to look inside and look for a positive feeling. And at the beginning, that was difficult for me. I didn't know what he meant by that, but I started to notice that as I paid less and less attention to the content of my thinking, when it started to lead me away from a good feeling, that I started to realize that the truth that we really have a default setting of mental well-being. That within the being of our soul, within the being of our spirit, every single one of us are connected to the same divine energy, or if you don't like the word divine, the same universal energy that was there before the universe was created. We're all connected to that. And there's a wisdom that flows through that energy that literally is available to us every moment that we live. And to know that I have something beyond my analytical, rational thinking to access has been a tremendous godsend. And people have often heard me quote that Einstein recognized this. Here's the greatest scientist since Newton. And yet one of my favorite quotes of Einstein's is, the intuitive mind, which to me is pointing to wisdom, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, he said. The rational or analytical mind is its faithful servant. That's powerful. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift. The analytical mind, its faithful servant. He went on to say, however, we have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. That honors the servant and that has difficulty letting go of their analytical thinking and the content that they create even when it's causing more pain for themselves, emotionally, and sometimes eventually even physically. When I was a Navy flight surgeon, after 3 months of schooling, intense schooling to be a doctor on an aircraft carrier was what we were trained for. We were then sent to the first 3 months of flight training. And the first, at least back then in 1971, the plane that was utilized was a T-34, which I understood to be equivalent to the little Cessna planes that are used to instruct people if you went to your local airport. And one of the things they did after teaching you to land and take off is they would teach you what to do if you stalled out your airplane. Now, for some reason, because we had so many in our class, I was assigned to the T-28, which was a 1,400 horsepower, fully acrobatic plane, and I had no flying experience, so it would have been nicer for me to have started in the Cessna. But I was later told by those in my class that were in the Cessna that they were taught that plane was aerodynamically stable, unlike most military planes, that it was aerodynamically stable. And I will tell you that we are psychologically aerodynamically stable in that even when we go into a spin, it is easy to come out of the spin. And I'll use the metaphoric story. The instructor would take the students to about 8,000 feet, and they would check the airspace below them. And then they would put the plane into a stall so that it started into an inverted spin and was spinning down towards the earth. I remember when they did this in the plane that I was in, and I really had thoughts about, what was I thinking to join this program. But the instructor would stay calm, and at about 5,000, as he started, he'd say, now watch what I do at about 5,000 feet to get us out of this spin. And so for 3,000 feet, this plane would be whirling around in this inverted spin, and at about 5,000 feet, the instructor would take his hands completely off the controls. And the plane, being aerodynamically stable, would suddenly come out of the spin into flight, a straight flight. And I've been told that maybe you use a little left rudder then as it comes out, but essentially it comes completely out of the spin, and then you put your hands back on the controls. Now, the instructor did this twice. And on the third time, it was the student's turn. And the instructor would say, remember what I did to help us get out of the spin. And in fact, the instructor indicated that frequently, and the students that I knew said it was very hard for them when they got to 5,000 feet. It was hard for them to let go of the controls, even though they had seen the instructor do it twice with wonderful results. Because there was, in their head, they were hearing from their brain, you can get this out of this. You're almost there. You can get yourself out of this. You keep working at it. You'll get there. And the instructor at times has had to literally pull the person's hands off the controls to keep the plane from diving into the ground. It was a powerful metaphor for me to learn. Another way I think of it is that we're all born with a life vest, so that it's in the cards for us not to drown. But even if you and I were in a pretty good life vest, you could put enough weights on the life vest that we would start to go under the water. And what we do when we get caught up in the content of our negative thinking, we literally weigh ourselves down and find ourselves lost below the surface. And interestingly, that's the times when we're often most inclined to pay attention to our thinking and less wise to do so. I tell people that to take your thinking seriously when you're really upset or frightened or any negative emotion makes every bit as much sense as a man 4 feet underwater with a 3-foot snorkel taking a deep breath. Because 100% of the time, things will get much worse. Now, to apply this to my practice of psychiatry, I could tell stories as many have heard me do through the years, and I don't have the time to do that. My friend, those of you that have seen the movie Lincoln, I love the fact that he was such a storyteller. And you remember one point in the play, his cabinet said, "I can't stand to hear you tell another story." You know, well, when I was in Israel with the Rabbi Chaim Levine, working with the Israeli soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder, Chaim came to call me, "Bill, do you have time for a story, Pettit?" Because it seemed to him that I always had one. I guess if you live 70 years, you start to accumulate stories. But I will tell you that we could go through the DSM-4 criteria from schizophrenia to bipolar disorder, to people with severe eating disorders, with people with severe obsessive-compulsive disorders, with people with drugs and alcohol problems, etc. And I will tell you that I've seen somebody with that label who, when they came to a deep understanding of the principles, there was no evidence of that label. And in fact, what they had done is, at a biological level, is they silenced those genes, if you will, and activated the healthy and protective genes. And at a spiritual level, gotten back home to that place of infinite wisdom within themselves, that we're all, not in a place, but that we're all we're all connected to that source. It makes it exciting for me, because when people walk through my door to come for help, what I see is a healthy human being that doesn't know that they're healthy. And I just have to remind them of it. It's a wonderful thing. You can hear Kathy Casey. At first, when people hear this, we all have exceptions. And Kathy Casey, who's done this incredible work in the prisons, talked about when she walks into the prisons, even with these criminals that people would say are hardened and have the look and in there for 40 years imprisonment, what she sees as beautiful human beings who've just lost touch with the beauty that they have within them. I remember my dear friend George Pransky saying that for him it was like people come into his office with their hands kind of over their eyes saying, "I'm having trouble seeing clearly. Do you think that you can help me at all?" And metaphorically, he knows that all he has to do is to help them lower their hand from their face, and they will see quite clearly. And the same is true as people start to give less attention to the negative content of their thinking. As Mr. Banks says in Second Chance, the scratches start to go away from the window, and people see with clarity the beauty and the wonder, with one beauty and wonder of being alive, of just being alive. So I'm aware of the time, and I'm thinking that this may be a good place, Aaron. If people had some questions, I'd certainly be glad to entertain them as best as I could.
Okay, so I noticed that there are a number of people that have their exclamation marks on, which is my way of...
Gee, that's unusual, right?
Well, I think that's the way of asking a question. So I don't want to discriminate in any way. I'm going to go down the list. I'm going to start with Don, because it looks like he's got his hand up. He might not have meant it. Oh, so Don, if you had something to say, I'm unmuting you.
I didn't mean to raise my hand if
Okay,
I did.
well,
Sorry.
okay. So now I'm going to keep going down the list. So Amy Johnson, you have your hand up. You might have a question, you might not. So I'm going to unmute you now. You can either ask your question or let me know if you didn't. Amy? Amy, did you have a question? Okay, I'm moving down the list. And Guy Fisher, Guy, if you had a question, you're unmuted, so you're free to ask your question if you had one. Guy?
It's a bit weird. I didn't actually ask a question, but I didn't mean to, so apologies.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So if you don't have a question, I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Jamie Sellers, I'm checking if you're unmuted. Did you have a question, Jamie? No, it didn't look like you did. Kareem, did you have a question? Did you have a question, Kareem?
No, I didn't. I didn't press anything either.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, look, anyone, now I'm, Mara, did you have a question?
You unmuted? Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Yes, Mara. Hi.
Hi guys. No, I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. Okay, so if anyone has a question, press the little exclamation mark.
Well, and Aaron, if you had a question or a thought or the kinds of questions that you often hear, I'm certainly welcome to do the best in that with that.
Oh, hold on 1 second. We do have a question. Melissa, you found the hands up. Well done. Well done. Maybe you can let us know what that was. But Melissa, looks like you have a question. And you can go ahead.
Can you hear me? Because I'm not sure if the phone's working or the computer.
Very clear. I can hear you very clear, Melissa.
Melissa, I can tell you that both of them are working.
Okay, I'm scared to touch any of them because I don't know where I'm actually from.
I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, so I guess I can ask this question. So what would you do with a person, I'm actually talking about my daughter, so that, you know, kind of needs to know innate health, but like absolutely does not want to. But she is having some medical issues and you know, she has asthma, and I actually just took her to a couple of different psychiatrists just to find out where the stress is playing in this. And they both of them said the same thing, that it's after the attack starts. So she's taking that attack much worse than it really needs to be because she's panicking and she's going into a whole anxiety thing. So we ended up starting her on cognitive therapy, which she was willing to do. I'm having so much thought on that because I just want her to learn this, and she is, she's scared. I don't know. I can't even tell you why she doesn't want to learn it, but for whatever reason, she's like not into it. So I actually consulted with the Krumholtz, like they were thinking I should just force her into an intensive. I'm not comfortable with that. Where would you say? I actually tried to get in touch with you, so I'm so happy that I'm getting you now. I wasn't able to get in touch with you for some reason. Where would you go with such a thing? Let's say this was a regular client. Where would you go with this?
Yes, okay. Melissa, first of all, do you want my email so you can email me? And
I would love it.
Yeah.
I just wasn't able to find you for some reason.
It's W, as William, F as in Frank, Pettit, P-E-T-T-I-T, Jr. @gmail.com.
Okay, so W.F. Pettit.
Junior, J.R.
J.R. and Gmail? Okay, great.
Okay. Now, tell me your experience of the principles. How long have you been involved in the principles?
So I've been learning for 4 years, and I've been teaching for 2.
Okay. And have you read all of Mr. Banks's books? Or?
I've read 2. I've read Richard Carlson's book. I've read. I actually have on order now George and Linda's book, Relationship Handbook.
Which of Mr. Banks's books have you read?
Second Chance and Missing Links.
Okay. Well, it sounds funny, but I'm going to encourage you to continue reading Mr. Banks's books. The sequel to Second Chance being, The Quest of the Pearl,
Okay.
and The Enlightened Gardener and The Enlightened Gardener Revisited.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a wonderful book called Dear Liza, which is, Sid would say, was his children's book. And it's for children from 7 to 107.
Okay.
And I have yet to, it's only 88 pages. I've yet to see anyone that hasn't read that hasn't had their heart deeply touched. Okay? As far as to how to have your daughter be interested, I can't give you that. I really can't. I mean, it's not because I'm not wanting to. I think that comes from a deep love and rapport that your daughter feels from you, and she sees from you that you know something that she doesn't know, and she wants to know it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where that rapport comes from, such that when you say, I'd like you to, would you, and it may be that it'll come to you to say, after you've read the Dear Liza yourself, that you might say, would you let me, could we read this together, or would you read it and we'll talk, or, I think you will know, as you deepen and get quieter, your wisdom will guide you. Sid was always great about that. People would say, well, what should I say to my son or to my wife or to my husband? And he'd say, here's the deal. If I even knew, which I don't because I'm not you in your life, if I knew what to tell you to say, after you said it and then they replied back, you'd be lost, right? Because you'd be back on your own. So all I can say is, to the degree that you see that these three principles and see the nature of them, and you see it deep enough that it impacts you profoundly, that from that place of love and that you have for your daughter and caring and wanting her to have a nice life, you will see how, from that place of love, you will see how to do that far better than me or anybody else can tell you to.
It's interesting because 2 years ago, when this whole thing started, I actually had taken her to a seminar with Toby Walter.
Mm-hmm.
So we had done together a 2.5-day seminar. And at the end of the seminar, I had said to her, what do you think? And this was her answer. And after that, she refused to talk about it again. But this was her answer. She said, I know if I understood what she was talking about, I would probably be okay, but I don't. So I'm done.
Right. It's a journey. Again, my answer is the same. It will be from a loving place, and from a peaceful place that you're at, that you will see so clearly what to do. It won't be from me or anyone else telling you how to do it.
Right now, the cognitive is feeling right to me just because that's where we're at.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that. If somebody really understands the principles, I have a hard time thinking that somebody would think it would make sense to have people look at the content of their thinking. But I'm always a little bit surprised at people that say they're even teaching the principles and yet have only read 2 of Mr. Banks's books, because we're so fortunate to have the breadth of material and the breadth of understanding that he shared with us. I would encourage you to go back to the source material.
Okay, thank you.
That would be my recommendation.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Melissa has set the standard here. She managed to raise her hand. I don't know how you did that, Melissa. What did you press?
There's on the bottom of the screen, there's a raise hand, and there's what does this one say? A feedback, and
oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, right at the bottom.
My screen must be different. Yeah. I know everything does that, but So I think we have time for one more question.
Sure.
If anybody has one. So there's a picture of a hand on the bottom of your screen. So if you have a question or a comment, or please feel free to raise your hand. I'll give you a few seconds to find that. No, I don't think we have any takers, Bill. I think that's a nice place to leave it. Thank you very, very much. And as we said before, and I think it's great to have access to the quality of speakers and with the experience and the grounding and the style that Bill Pettit had. I'm getting a few messages now thanking you, Bill. So people can't speak, but they're typing in their thanks. Thank you very much. And don't forget, next month we'll have another lecture. It was supposed to be Keith Blevins, but I think he had something come up in his calendar, so we'll be announcing the next one very, very, very soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And please come next month and visit the site, and you'll be getting notifications about new materials. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say in closing, Don. You're unmuted.
Just thank everybody for their time, and please spread the word about the site and about these webinars. And I think as we get rolling, we'll be able to have them more frequently as we cast the net wider and get some of the best 3 principles teachers in the world out here on at least a monthly basis, if not more frequently. So thanks everyone for their time, and please frequent the site. We'll be putting up new material tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And also, you know, this is all of ours organization. So if you have kind of ideas or ways in which you'd like to contribute, just let us know, please, because we'd love to get you involved. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you very, very much.
You're very, very welcome. It was a joy.
That was great.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Don. I'll be on tomorrow.
All right, talk to you then.
Okay, bye-bye.